Thank you, Dan. Stand for flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm sorry, Dr. Wayne, I really didn't know you were out there. I'm sorry. Okey doke. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Paxton,
Here.
Mr. Eisenbach,
Present.
Ms. Nelson,
Here.
Mr. Knox,
Here.
Dr. Ween,
Here.
Mr. Mosier,
Here.
and Mr. Christensen.
Here.
Correspondent agenda changes. There are no ceremonial matters for tonight. Correspondence, ceremonial matters, special reports, none. Persons to be heard, any item not on the agenda? Yes, sir. Any item not on the agenda? Not yet. We're now under persons to be heard, any item not on the agenda. Okay. We'll now go to report. Okay, yes, Chief. Gets worse.
When you get the seeing eye dog.
Good evening. I'm Robert Beatty, also known by my Tlingit name, Kadat Ah. I come before you tonight because of the recent tragedies and troubled times. We all know of the horrific treatment of George Floyd, which has sparked national outrage. I'm here tonight to spread a message that we as law enforcement understand the plight of our fellow citizens. I'm a board member of the Alaska Association of Chiefs of Police, and I want to also share with you that we as leaders of law enforcement community condemn the acts that occurred. I feel that it is important to let the community know the quality of their police department and the quality of policing in general in Alaska. I've been in Alaska law enforcement since 1985. I've seen the good and some bad over the years and know that law enforcement in Alaska is of the highest quality. Honesty, integrity, loyalty, courage, attention to detail, professionalism, self-discipline, officer safety, and commitment to public service are all core values taught at the Academy from day one. They are not just words that are spewed forth, they are the foundation of our beliefs on which all training is based. It molds our way of doing business, our interactions, our successes, and the success of our communities. They are lofty standards, and sometimes we fall short, but the professionalism in Alaska is such that we hold each other accountable, and more importantly, we embrace respect. We at the Sitka Police Department value cultural diversity. Since I have hired on as your Chief of Police, I've worked on various projects with the tribe and worked to represent our own cultural identities here in Sitka. I spoke about our core values we learn at the Academy. In addition, I feel that community members also need to know the values that are held at the Sitka Police Department. Learning and growth are continual components of and important aspects of the department. We conduct weekly leadership development training on topics such as use of force, diversity, operations, as well as best practices. More importantly, we strive to provide the best community-oriented policing possible. I challenge my officers on a weekly basis to engage in activities, to go out and get to know people, attend functions, and be part of the community, not apart from it. I'd like to point out one other fact that may be overlooked. If you look at our uniforms, you will notice that we wear a pin above our right breast pocket. The pin represents the lovebirds, the eagle and the raven. It's symbolic of the balance achieved between opposites, of understanding all people. You need to have confidence and trust in your police department. I will say one thing: we are your friends, your loved ones, and your neighbors. We hear you. We are you. We may not always agree on all issues, but in those differences, we represent all. With understanding and tolerance, we can move forward and respect the struggle of others. There's been a movement for radical reform within law enforcement. I can assure you that our practices are current and we meet or exceed all legal standards. We continually adapt our means and methods to provide better services. Our officers are well trained, and with overall experience level of the officers being 11.3 years. I did not come before you to debate the rights and wrongs of individual actions. I've spoken about the quality and training and professionalism of the men and women of your police department. And I take this opportunity to encourage everyone to move forward with love, understanding, and respect in your hearts. Thank you, Gunas Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Any other persons to be heard?
Good evening, Assembly members. I am Adrienne Wilbur. As the first statement of my request tonight, I want to thank the Tlingit people and recognize that we hold this meeting tonight on Tlingit land. Likely, all of you has seen news coverage of the worldwide protests advocating for justice for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and all Black and brown people who have lost their lives due to systemic racism in this country, be it from police brutality and murder or inequitable access to public services like education, housing, and healthcare. I gathered with fellow Sitkans on June 1st to express my grief and spent subsequent days feeling disassociated from our national narrative, while friends in the lower 48 joined movements for change on the streets of Seattle, Los Angeles, and elsewhere. To me, a white woman who spends most of my time at home and in the garden because of the ongoing pandemic, it often feels very peaceful here in Sitka. But the thing about systemic racism and generational trauma is that it is here all the time, woven into the history and fabric of our small town as much in moments of peace as in moments of protest. It is up to all of us to make Sitka a safe and equitable place to live, whether we are Black, Alaska Native, white, or any person of color in our community. It's up to all of us to find racism's manifestations and remove them one by one. This requires action. I want this assembly to explicitly acknowledge the necessity of being anti-racist, focus on specific actions we can take as a governing body of this town. Here are 3 ideas. According to our city administrator, John Leach, in the fiscal year 21 operating budget, quote, "The city of Sitka continues to experience difficulties in recruiting and retaining qualified employees, especially in the police department. I advocate that we direct funding away from jobs that have proved to be undesirable and instead hire people to cover that work in different ways. For example, hire mental health care crisis workers instead, following the model of the Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets, or CAHOOTS program employed in Eugene, Oregon to reduce violence and provide services to community members. Take action to shelter houseless Sitkans by applying for a Continuum of Care grant or Emergency Solutions grant from the Department of Housing and Urban Development to purchase the former Presbyterian Church, now priced at under $400,000, and open it as a shelter. Replace English place names on municipal signs and maps with Tlingit place names, as New Zealand has widely done with Maori place names. Please commit to some action dismantling systemic racism in your town, and ask yourself, what are you doing to serve the future generations of Sitka to make this town a more equitable, inclusive, and desirable place to live? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other persons to be heard?
Good evening, my name is Michael Mausbach. I too would like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on Tlingit Ani, and I encourage each of us to continually recognize this historical fact. In the wake of George Floyd's murder, our collective consciousness has begun to shift. George, like Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery before him, represents only a fraction of the Black life lost to police violence in this country. I am here tonight in the hopes of leveraging my own privilege by challenging our community and this assembly to both acknowledge and confront systemic racism in all of its insidious forms. Ours is a community steeped in generational trauma, and as conversations around systemic racism continue to develop, we too must join in and contribute to such discussions. That being said, I am asking that our assembly both acknowledge and commit themselves and our city to anti-racist work moving forward, as other cities such as Dayton, Ohio, Evanston, Illinois, and Denver, Colorado, to name a few, have already done. Additionally, I would encourage you all to seek out and champion alternative budgetary proposals and visions for community equity. Here are a few such proposals. To echo a previous point made, the FY21 operating budget noted that the city of Sitka is experiencing difficulties in recruiting and retaining qualified employees in the police department. I'm here tonight to advocate for the reallocation of police funds towards social and community service programs that would longitudinally work to the benefit of our community, such as non-coercive mental health care, drug and alcohol treatment, and peer support initiatives. Begin the removal of the Baranoff statue from outside of Centennial Hall and join a larger international movement of communities who no longer wish to memorialize violent colonial legacies. And third, work to support our unhomed population by applying for a Continuum of Care grant or Emergency Solutions grant from the Department of Housing and Urban Development in order to purchase the former Presbyterian Church for use as a designated men's shelter. We as a community must reflect on who we are, who it is we wish to be, and what it is we can do to build a more inclusive and equitable Sitka. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Other comments from the public? Okay, we're now back to reports.
Good evening, Mayor and Assembly members. It's good to see you all in person. I thought I should come down here. I am Rachel Roy. I am the Executive Director of the Greater Sitka Chamber of Commerce, and I just wanted to give an update to you all about the 4th of July and a new program that the Chamber is putting together for this year, special for this year. This year will be a little bit different, as we know, as many things have been different. Our 4th of July parade will not be happening as it usually does. And to give residents and businesses a way to show their, to still honor and commemorate the Independence Day, we've started a program called Share Your Spark. And we actually conducted a survey of our membership. We had over 140 responses, and in there were ideas and suggestions on how we could still come together as a community this holiday and this summer. And so Share Your Spark was born. The part of it is a decorating contest, so we encourage residents and businesses to decorate their homes and storefronts so that our community can show a commemoration of the holiday, as well as allowing individuals to maybe clean up a beach or a section of road around the community. And we had a few groups, community groups that had said, what can I do? What needs to be done in the community that we can help, because they aren't having their regular programming. And so this would be a way that they could do that. What we're asking is for people to photograph their spark that they, in the area that they've taken care of, or the picture of their storefront, and they can submit that. We'll have prizes for the decorations of stores and nonprofits. And then there'll be a special drawing for everyone that shares a spark. We'll be sharing those on our Facebook page, as well as through our email listings. The Chamber will still be putting together our annual calendar of events, and we encourage people to turn in those to us, and understanding that it'll look different, but there's still a lot of things that happen over the course of that 4th of July weekend. We do encourage people to read the covid19.alaska.gov site for all of the mandates for gatherings, as well as there's a really great, and we've shared it out, is the CDC has a recommendations for mass gatherings. So anyone over 50 people, over 20 people, there's a lot of recommendations on how you can kind of mitigate the risk of sharing the virus. And our 4th of July parade, has drawn up to, I think, 4,000 people in the past. And so we really just want to see this holiday get through and be safe, and encourage everyone to share your spark. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Any other comments from persons to be heard?
Good evening, Assembly members. My name is Tom Gamble. I wanted to thank you all again for this meeting this evening, this time, space. Later on this evening, there may be discussion about utility rates and mortgage rates under consideration. I would like to offer some consideration and ideas because I missed the first meeting that was called on short notice.
If I could, sir, this is for persons to be heard on items not on the agenda.
I could save those two then, if I may just save the last of the 2 minutes, my rest of the time.
Thank you for being considerate, right?
Okay, so the rest of my time I'd like to use for an item not on the agenda. It became clear during the No Name Mountain Granite Creek Master Plan process that there was inadequate consultation with the tribe and tribal membership. I did, however, spend a lot of my own personal time in consultations and creating opportunities for people to be heard at Natural Resources Committee meetings for the Sitka Tribe of Alaska, the Clinton Haida Community Council, the Sitka Tribe of Alaska council members. And I continue to request support and time from assembly members and administrators for ideas and ways to be able to utilize information that was submitted in that plan. There was a great deal of work that was submitted, and I'd like to applaud the efforts of the city for at least taking a look at the possibilities. And I believe that with the collaborative effort between the city and some different players, including the corporation who has substantial interest of land holdings out at Catleon Bay, and other entities beyond just my own self, could take a look at some of the uses of the land, and we could utilize some of this to expand on the tribe and the city's plans for economic development and growth for both the citizens of the city and the tribal membership, which is a benefit. And you hear some of these people talking about discrimination and land issues and lots of protests and fighting. And we're not talking about administrations like George Washington and Lincoln that we were taught about in history. We're talking about the members on this board this evening that have an opportunity to play a huge role in looking at land mitigations that include partnerships with the city, the tribe, the corporations. And it looks to ameliorate the impacts of some of those things that we call historical trauma, racial discrimination. And when we look to fund the police force, we do so with the presence of mind that we're looking for equity. And I want to continue the discussions with the administrator in ways that I can provide assistance to look at this plan. I am going to continue my discussions within the community. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Other comments from the public on the persons to be heard? Doke. We'll now go to reports. I do have one report. I was on a teleconference last week with Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan, as were many people, and there are two takeaways. One is that the PPP timeframe has been extended from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, and the hiring reduced from 70% to 60%. The second one that was really sort of shocking was the census. In Alaska, we're at this point only about 40% complete of our census, and nationally they're at the 60% level. So, Madam Clerk and some members, we need to pound the bushes to be sure that we get our citizens out, all of our citizens out, to be classified, to be heard in the census. Mr. Administrator. Right.
Thank you. I've got three things. First, we got our first distribution of CARES Act funding is available now. We're still working through our framework, and I plan on hopefully having something together for I believe it's an 18th special meeting where we can discuss how much further we want to go with that, or if our first draft looks good. And there will be some opportunity for public comment then. Second item is we ended the RFI, that's the request for information stage of the Marine Services Center. We only received one input on that, so we're looking through that now, and I'll be planning a future meeting to decide a path forward if we want to investigate where to go with the Marine Services Center. And the last item is negotiations are going pretty well on the haul out. And my plan is to either bring, I'm going to bring a term sheet to the table for the assembly to decide on forward movement, on whether we go forward with that contract. And plan on either the 23rd regular meeting or June 30th special meeting. That's all I have.
Mr. Leach, in our packet, you had a letter. And I was wondering if you could describe its contents.
I'm assuming the Board of Regents letter?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
because I think it's an important thing that
Absolutely.
will just get lost.
Yeah. In fact, I don't mind reading it if that's okay. We sent a letter to the Board of Regents, and I'll read it here. It says, "The City and Borough of Sitka respectfully objects to all options that would eliminate the University of Alaska Southeast as a separate university within the UA system. Southeast Alaska greatly benefits from the education and training opportunities offered by UAS, and with educational programs centered on local economic enterprises, UAS allows students to remain in Southeast Alaska and contribute to our local economy. The UAS Sitka campus is an integral part of our local community. As a valued community partner, UAS provides vital educational opportunities for young people and adults alike in Southeast Alaska and is key to helping our young people remain in the region as successful adults. UAS is directly responsible for Sitka maintaining a trained, highly skilled workforce capable of making the most of our region's best economic opportunities. UAS is a critical resource that we cannot afford to lose or downgrade."
Thank you. Well said.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wayne. It was a good letter and an important issue. We have liaison representatives? No? Okay. Yeah, Val,
Mr. Mayor, I've got one report.
Yes.
Parks and Rec, this is Kevin Knox. Parks and Rec met today. The couple of things that some of our community partners in our outdoor recreation community wanted us to know. The Harbor Mountain Trail is open, or the Harbor Mountain Road is open all the way through to the top now. And the Sawmill Creek Campground still remains closed. They're waiting for their campground host to arrive in July, so they're asking people not to use the campground area at this time. Cross Trails continues to make really good progress, and they're really excited about how that's turning out. And as a lot of people are probably starting to see, the ball fields are open, and we're starting to see some baseball being played, which is a very nice welcome sign that summer is on its way. And Little League's excited that they're getting their plans in place to be able to start having practices, and as well as the Major League Baseball. So, sounds like Crescent Harbor is well on its way to its final completion standard, and unless Mr. Leach, you have any other update there, things are moving along with Crescent Harbor.
Thank you, Kevin. Valerie?
I attended the Police and Fire Commission meeting, I think it was last Wednesday. There was a concern brought up about the bicycles on the sidewalks, and there may be some work coming to codify what state statutes already say that it's not legal to ride your bicycle on sidewalks in the business area. And we don't have that in our code, but maybe we need to polish it up a little bit. And then the other business was they granted an appeal of a parking violation or registration. Thanks.
Thank you, Valerie. Yeah, Dr. Wayne?
This is under other?
Under other? Let's get the clerk first then.
Okay.
Clerk?
Okay, I just have a few announcements. I'll read, we have quite a few vacancies on our boards and commissions, so I'll just read through that list quickly. The Animal Hearing Board, Building Department Appeals Board, the Gary Paxton Industrial Park Board, Health Needs and Human Services Commission, Historic Preservation Commission, Investment Committee, Library Commission, Local Emergency Planning Commission, Parks and Recreation Committee, Police and Fire Commission, and Tree and Landscape Committee. So a lot of opportunities for folks to volunteer and do some good work. If they're interested, contact our office and we'll get you set up with an application and on a future agenda. I also wanted to notify folks that the municipal election will be conducted in the same manner that the state is conducting the primary. There will be an opportunity for citizens to request a ballot by mail. They can vote by mail. There will also be an opportunity to take advantage of advanced voting 2 weeks prior to the municipal election, like we've historically done. Both those options will be allowed. And then also, and folks can vote on October 6th, municipal election day. So we'll be doing a lot of advertising about that, encouraging folks to take advantage of whichever option they're most comfortable with. The candidate filing period for the municipal election opens July 20th. There are 3 seats to be filled on the assembly, the mayoral seat, and then 2 assembly seats, and then 2 seats to be filled on the school board. So again, that opens up July 20th and runs through August 7th, I believe is the deadline. So if folks have questions about that, they can contact our office, and that's all I have.
Dr. Wayne, under other?
Under other, I'm the representative to the EOC, and part of difficulty of reporting on the EOC is that things are very, very fluid and that they change week to week. And though maybe last week the discussion was how will things be at the airport when Mandate 18 came into position, that is already old news because it started on Saturday, and what I want to hear is the new news on how things actually went. And so there's a lot of activity, a lot of good conversation, but like I said, things change so rapidly. Hard to give the details, and I look forward to hearing Mr. Leach's report on how Mandate 18 is progressing in the city. Also, there is the Fisheries Infection Committee, which meets on Friday, and you can imagine how concerned and at attention the group is as it relates to the Whittier recent fishery positivities and the boat that was coming up from Seattle to Alaska and all the positives. And so they are doing the best that they can, and they're trying very hard to put all the pieces in place, which includes testing of all their members and keeping closed campuses. And that turns out to be a very interesting and thoughtful meeting. Thank you.
Okay, we're now at the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the...
I'm sorry, I'd like to pull A.
Like to pull A?
Yeah.
The minutes?
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item B, approving a restaurant designation permit application and licensed premises diagram application for Hector Berrigan DBA Pizza Express at 1321 Sawmill Creek Road, Suite E, F, G, H, and I.
Second.
Any comments from the public on item B under the consent agenda? Back to the assembly. Comments from the assembly?
Yeah, I'd like to say buenos suerte to Hector Barragan, and this is quite a project that he has, and I wish him well. I read within the thing he's going to have live entertainment, so another venue here in Sitka to have some good food and dance, maybe, who knows, but good luck to him.
Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve item B as in boy, Mayor Paxton,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Dr. Ween,
Yes.
and Ms. Nelson.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0.
We're now at item A.
The reason I wanted this pulled is that there are 2 sets of minutes. Under the May 26, 2020 minutes, under persons to be heard, Karen Lucas had expressed a concern about drugs, and here it says regards to drug addiction, but the primary aspect of her comments related to the meth problem here in Sitka and what is being done about it. And in the minutes, normally there's a lot of leeway, but I think regards to drug addiction, I thought it needed to be repeated that this has to do with specifically the meth issue here in Sitka. So I'll say the word one more time, meth issue here in Sitka. So that was the only thing. You don't have to change it or anything. I just wanted to highlight
I like that.
So.
We have a motion and a second.
I move to approve item A 20-115, approve the minutes of the May 26th and 28th Assembly meetings.
Public comment, assembly comment, call for the vote, please.
You can actually do this by unanimous consent.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Under board and commission appointments, item C, could I have a motion, please?
I move to reassign category membership of Historic Preservation Commission member Roberta Littlefield from Native Community to at-large.
Second.
Public comment? Yes, please.
Oh, it's hard to breathe in this.
I'd like to explain why I came to this idea that this would be a good thing for me to do. I have been on the Sitka Historical Preservation Commission for over 10 years. The last couple of years, I was voted to be the chairman, and it's been a privilege, an honor. It's been, I felt so proud to be able to represent my community, and now we have a problem with barely being able to make a quorum, and we're absent. We're down 2 community members, and it occurred to me that if there's 2 at-large seats open, maybe I should jump off of my community seat, my Native community seat, take one of the at-large commission seats, and leave 2 options open, which might hopefully encourage greater participation from the Native community when there's a designated seat there that is recognized, that they're responsible for speaking up for their community. Perhaps that maybe we might get more Native and perspective and representation if I open that seat up for, hopefully there'll be people who are interested in serving on the commission. It's not difficult. I encourage anybody who's interested. We have 1 at-large, 2 at-larges. I want to take one, and maybe, hopefully, after tonight, there'll be a Native community seat. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Robbie. Good consideration. Help me out. We had a motion in a second? Yeah. Okay. Public comment? Thank you. Yeah, Bob's, Mr. Sam.
Good evening, Mayor Paxton, Assembly members. My name is Bob Sam. I am currently a Historic Preservation Commission member. I've been appointed by Sitka Tribe of Alaska. I've served for a number of years now, and I support this motion to appoint a Native community member of this community. There are well over 3,000 tribal citizens living in Sitka, and it would be wonderful to see more participation of our Native community with the city of Sitka in a decision-making process. We have a shared history here, and the formation of this commission it's very important to remember back in 2000 when the Historical Preservation Commission was formed. The city of Kodiak was the first city in Alaska to become a certified local government. And how they did that was they had support from the Kodiak Native Association through resolution of support. I was in Sitka. I worked for the Isabel Miller Museum. And when we tried to apply for grants for historic preservation, we could not qualify for these grants until we organized to be a preservation commission, historic preservation commission. I was here and I actively participated getting a resolution from Sitka Tribe of Alaska. Also, in the commission, in the ordinances, section 6, it talks about consultation with Sitka Tribe in our shared historical resources. That is a very crucial, it was added to the commission. I'm sorry, I support this motion and I have a lot more to say. I'm very happy to hear another Native voice coming on our commission. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Thank you for all the good work you do in the town. Right?
Scott Celine, Historic Preservation Committee. I too support this motion, Ishkahati Wa'e. And I just want to say that, earlier tonight when the younger generation was talking about removing Baranoff's statue, be advised, Baranoff's statue represents white supremacy. And I'm just now learning what that means, even though I love history. And the quote that the Hames family put on the bottom of the statue out there comes from a book called Lord of Alaska, which I recommend everybody should read. But that's the contention of what's going to be coming to a head, and the quicker that we can address from our white privilege and celebrating European triumph over First Nation people really is what that's coming to a head. And just be advised, that's where the folks are coming from. I don't think they want to rewrite history or anything. Thank you very much for being here.
Scott, other comments from the public? Back to the assembly? Yeah, Dr. Wayne?
I think that this is something that I support wholeheartedly. Roberta Robbie Littlefield is a unique and wonderful asset to this community, and it has been for so long. If you look at her CV, her curriculum vitae, that means in Latin, one of the meanings is a course of life, your course of life. But curriculum can also mean a very fast chariot. And so it could be a fast chariot of life. And if you look at what she has done, she has not slowed up for a very long time. And I feel that, whatever Roberta wants, Roberta gets. And so I fully support this. And thank you for your thoughtful, I'll call it maneuvering on this issue.
Concur. Other comments on the assembly? Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to reassign category membership of Historic Preservation Commission member Roberta Littlefield from Native community to at-large, Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbaz?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
And Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on item C.
Now at item D, may I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the City and Borough of Sitka athletic field use policy and guidelines as recommended by the Parks and Recreation Committee.
Second.
And I understand understand that Brendan Marks is going to speak?
Yes, that's correct. I need to get him on the line.
Okay, I'll just do in-person testimony first. Any public comment on this item from the public on the athletic field? Okay, if not, then we'll hear from Mr. Marks.
Brandon?
Hi, Brandon. It's Sarah Peterson calling from the City and Borough of Sitka Assembly meeting.
Hi.
Hi, we are at item D, and the motion was made to approve the CBS athletic field use policy and guidelines as recommended by the Parks and Recreation Committee, and it was my understanding that you were going to provide an overview for the Assembly this evening?
Yes, I can do that.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Brandon Marks, and I helped form this subcommittee as a member of the Parks and Rec Commission. And basically, it consisted of all the different user groups that use Upper Moeller. And the idea was to reach consensus and for each, basically reach a compromise by consensus rulemaking among all the different competing user groups. So, and we needed to do this because there was a conflict, there was a number of conflicts between the various user groups that came up that we won't go into, but I think a lot of us know that was a very difficult time, and this subcommittee helped remedy that. So basically, we all got together and we reached this compromise. It was difficult to do, but I ultimately all agreed that this was something we could live with, and I don't think anyone was super happy at the end of it, which is, I think, the sign of a good compromise. But at the end of the day, what it does is set up a system where we all have to kind of get together. We have to get together and talk. And it's something that is helpful for people that don't always get together. We're all neighbors in this town, and we all know one another, but we don't always like to get together and sort through these things. But this sets up a system where we get together at least 3 times a year, and we talk about the schedule and our plans for being on the field. There is a deference to the priority users, and we after those 3 meetings refresh the schedule. That's the plan. It goes to the city, and then it will be refreshed on the city's calendar or website. So that's the way it's designed to work. Although right now with COVID and other things, it hasn't yet been adopted. We're planning on adopting it tonight, or hoping that that's the case. But so far, it hasn't worked exactly as designed. We did not meet in May as is scheduled under the policy, and so the current schedule that people see, the public sees, is a vestige from our January meeting, and so in part that has already maybe ruffled some feathers because people have noticed that people aren't out there during their scheduled times. The field's open, and yet it looks like it's booked on the website. So I guess what I'm getting at is I think that once the policy goes into effect and we follow the policy, I think it will go a long way toward remedying a lot of this. And we do plan on meeting in this coming Monday by Zoom, and we'll refresh the schedule after that, again, in deference to the priority users. But I think that will address some of the recent concerns that have come up from the public, and they're justifiable concerns about, hey, it looks like this field's booked all the time and no one's out there. That's going to change a little bit because of the reopening and because of some of the mitigation plans that the city's reviewed and allowed groups to go out there. So some of that, again, I think that's the best way of talking about that. But so that's the way it's designed. Could it be improved? Possibly. We could, obviously, if we agreed to meet every every month, that would probably be better, but I think that would be asking a lot of these folks. So I think right now, I think the way it's written is good. And again, it was something that took a lot of effort. But I would ask that it be adopted.
Any questions for Brandon before we go to the assembly? Do you have any comments, John, on this issue? Okay. Comments from the public? Back to the assembly.
The question I would have is to ask Kevin, is he happy with this document after all of this? Because it would be very important to hear, because I know it was postponed, so has everything been settled and you feel satisfied?
Well, I think Brandon kind of pointed to some of the things that had come up. I had been approached by a few different groups that, this field is wrought with some of the tricks here that we've had to, I guess not tricks, but just hoops that people have had to jump through, or the priority user groups, taking, the overwhelming priority of the use of the field, and sometimes not necessarily exactly using the field during some of those times, and other groups wanting to be able to use the field. And one of the things that is one of those big compromises is being able to put in lines for other field use, other sports, and that kind of stuff it's been a long conversation within the community. It's been in some instances pretty difficult, and Brandon pointed that out as well. I think there's probably some room to grow with this, and some things we could probably change a little bit as we move forward and kind of learn better about how the field can be utilized by the most number of groups possible. The one parity piece that I think continues to come up and is probably a part of the crux of how this field gets scheduled out is the scheduling, and the fee per use is relatively low. So you don't have to have you don't pay by the hour, you don't pay by the day, you pay by the group that uses the field, and the size of the group. So there's probably some things that could be tweaked there. Just that might bring a little bit more parity to the scheduling. But I think going forward, it's where we're at right now, and where we can learn from, and maybe in the future it changes.
Thank you, Kevin. Other comments from the assembly? Call for the vote.
Okay, Dr. Ween,
Yes.
Mr. Knox, Mr. Eisenbaz,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mayor Paxton,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
and Mr. Christensen.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item D. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.
We're now at item E. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve ordinance 2020-26 on second and final reading, Title II Administration, Chapter 2.04, City and Borough of Assembly, Section 2.04.010 Agenda.
Second.
This ordinance would move the reports to the end of the meeting. For the general public, any comments from the public? Back to the assembly. Go ahead, Valerie.
Well, Dr. Ween pointed out that at the last meeting, our reports only took seconds, I guess. But I went back and I did some research, and we averaged probably 20 minutes, but it has gone as long as 45. And if every subcommittee or liaison did a report and used their full 3 minutes, we have 14 committees that we have liaisons to, that would be 42 minutes. If the mayor, the attorney, the administrator, the clerk, and other used their 3 minutes, as is called out in our code, that would be another 15 minutes, so that could take up to an hour. And I believe that if people are interested in what we're doing, what our subcommittees are doing, I'm not saying that the work that they do isn't valuable, but when you have people here for an item on the agenda and we take, half an hour to an hour to do this, I think it's better served at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Dr. Wayne.
Well, I realize that when I vote no on this, that I will probably be on the wrong side of history. But the important thing is that we are in the assembly. I don't mind taking the time, and I do believe that some of these things should be quite upfront. The fact that every liaison doesn't give a 3-minute report is a head scratch. And actually, we should encourage our liaisons to attend the meetings. We should encourage the attorney to give a good report. We should encourage the administrator to give a good report. Sarah always gives a good report, so no problem with our clerk. But the important thing is that it's the will of the assembly. So I thank you for your time.
Comments from the assembly?
Like I said last time, I don't have super strong feelings about this, but I think it's a little bit better to have it at the end, just because your energy level's not there. And I know we all have kind of different ideas of what liaison is, but I think if there's something that is really important that we all hear, we can make sure that it gets heard outside of the assembly. But most of the time, it's kind of like things that we already have, most of us have already read in our packet, and it's things that can be handled when our energy level's a little lower. But again, I don't have real super strong feelings about this.
Comments from the assembly?
I'll just say real quick, ditto what Tor said.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-26 on second and final reading, Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeiß?
No.
Dr. Whedon?
No.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mr. Knox?
No.
Okay, the motion passes 4-3 on item E.
We are now at item F. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve ordinance 2020-27 on second and final reading, amending Title II Administration, Chapter 2.20 Fire Department, Section 2.20.010 Establishment.
Second.
This, before public comment, this eliminates the Assistant Fire Chief. Public comment on this? Before we...
Not only should you keep the position of Assistant Fire Chief, but that you should fill the position now, as soon as possible. You're in the process of trying to hire a new fire chief. Any applicant for that position is going to want to know how well their new employer is going to support them. By not having an assistant chief, you're telling those applicants that they will have no backup. No backup if they have a family emergency, no backup if they want to take annual leave. After the last assistant chief retired, the solution was to create a new position of senior engineer to fill in during the chief's absence. While either of the senior engineers is capable of running the department on a temporary basis, it is not a long-term substitute for an officer. It's an officer position. That's why the military designates executive officers and not sergeants as backup to commanders. During the fatal landslide, it was the assistant chief who was the incident commander, leaving the fire chief, the city's emergency manager, available to handle the daily operations of the department and any other emergencies. You may remember that the electrical department had a large oil spill at the same time as the landslide. Pandemics, landslides, tsunamis, mass casualties do not always happen one at a time. When you hire an employee, there is a contract. In exchange for money and benefits, including retirement, the employee promises to do the job for which they were hired and do not put the city in a bad light by unethical and immoral conduct. Chief Miller has fulfilled his part of the contract. He has earned his retirement. I know that he volunteered to stay on out of sense of duty to the community he served for 32 years. But by not having an assistant chief, there's really no other options for someone with his dedication to the job. There are fire chiefs who do not have that same dedication. They only count on the days until their retirement. They do the job from 8 to 5 and perform only the minimum required to keep the position. We may not be as fortunate in our next chief as we have been with Chief Miller. And I can understand when times are tight, money-wise, extending the replacement of an ambulance or a fire truck for a year or two in those times. Pray that it doesn't break down during a response. But to treat your people that way is morally and ethically wrong. And my last question is, if the city code requires an assistant fire chief, why haven't we had one since Assistant Chief Stevens retired? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other comments from the public? Get back to the assembly. Yeah, Tor.
Yeah, first of all, I was going to make the same point about an XO that Mike did. XO is not, as I'm sure those of you who spend time in the military, not just the assistant of the boss. He or she does a lot of things that might go through the cracks and has a different relationship with the line troops. So I think it's an important thing to have. I know that I've spent a lot of time at the fire hall over the years, not so much lately, as I would like, but that the hall just runs better when there's an assistant chief. It means that there's people there. There is a command officer there a lot more. I believe it saves money in the long run. I think again, both by the fact that there's they can cover shifts and reduce overtime, but then also when you have something bad happen, which is the whole reason for the fire hall. I mean, the fire hall is not there for when everything's running smooth. The fire hall is there for when things hit the fan. That's when you need leadership. And not having it, and not having it in abundance, when it happens, leads to real costs, whether it is in life or property. And the landslide is a perfect example. You can't reach out and hire this position when something happens. You've got to have somebody there, and this person is one who would make sure the training happens, and again, and make sure the equipment's there. And it's not saying the chief won't be doing that, but it's a 24/7 job, and you can't ask the chief to be there all the time. And we've been lucky to have officers in both the chief and assistant chief position who were willing to spend way more time down there than they were being paid for. But you can't count on that, and nor should we ask them, whoever's coming in as chief, to be there all the time, which they would have to do without this position.
Thank you. Other comments from the assembly? Valerie.
This doesn't say that we aren't going to have an assistant chief. It's just removing the part from the code that says shall consist of a fire chief and assistant chief or chiefs. We've been going against the code because we haven't been funding it for 2 years, so I guess maybe we should all be in jail, but it just clears up the code. It goes on to say, and as many other positions as may be necessary. So the new chief could say, yeah, I'm going to have 3 assistant fire chiefs, but it's not in the code as a shall, and we're not breaking the law by not funding it when we don't have the money. And I will say this, I think that next year, come budget time, we are going to be up a creek with not too many paddles. Thank you.
No. Oh, yeah.
I concur with Assemblywoman Nelson in that it says it quite plainly that we are not, we are just doing a housekeeping chore here because, and I will repeat it, the department shall consist of a fire chief, and what we're eliminating is and assistant chief, meaning shall, meaning that we have to do it. But what it says afterwards is important, and that is as many other positions as may be necessary for the effective operation of the department. This is just housekeeping, and it doesn't compel us to have 100, maybe 20K position out there that we have to fund, shall fund, because I do believe that funding will be an issue. And if we have all of these things, we're going to have to come up with the money. And there is always, in the future, I know the Fed has the unlimited ability to print money, but somehow all that printing never ends up here. And so I believe that this gives us an opportunity to be agile and allows us to maneuver as opposed to being compelled. So this is housekeeping, which does not inhibit anyone from having an assistant or an assistant to the assistant. So I have to vote for this because, again, it's house cleaning. Thank you.
Mr. Mosier.
I would agree with Dr. Ween and Ms. Nelson. Yeah, this is just, I say this is a housekeeping thing. This is not saying we're not going to have a chief, assistant chief. That's very well possible. And Tor has a point. It may end up that we save money by not having people work overtime. You know, that's something the finance department's going to have to look at. This is just cleaning up code. And I would like to also reinforce what Ms. Nelson said is that come budget time next year, it's going to be a whole different conversation we're having right here. Nobody's really saying much, and I'm not, because we don't know what the landscape's going to be like. But I can guarantee there's going to be probably some budget adjustments that have to happen. And so we can't be just pie in the sky, we need to do this, we need to do that. We have to be realistic with what we have. Do we need a fire assistant, or could we use and should we have a assistant fire chief? Absolutely. Does this ordinance, if we pass it, prevent us from having one? Absolutely not. Thank you.
My position is there's sort of a discussion between money and organizational dynamics. Listen, I spent 30 years in the Army, several years as an executive officer, and a lot of years as a commander. And there's always a division of labor between those two in complex organizations. And I think as we lose this great fire chief that we've had and Dave Miller, and we move forward, we need to do so with an organization that's robust enough and a critical asset. And Tor's right. We're lucky in this town. We seldom have fires and crises, but when we do, we need an organization that's fit to do that. And in terms of budgeting, I'm not being cavalier here, but this last year, because of the COVID impact, our city administrator cut, what, $2 or $3 million out of her budget, asked everybody to do a 10% reduction. That's how you balance a budget. You don't do it by getting rid of key people. Anyway, I'm going to vote no on this item. Other comments from the Assembly?
Mayor Paxton, do we have or I guess this question is for Mr. Leach or Mr. Sweeney if he's there. Do we have an estimate of what overtime costs would look like now, and then what potential difference there is with having an assistant chief? Or is that something that needs to be looked at further?
It's something that would need to be looked at, but I do want to clarify that this is, as some other members said, more house cleaning. This position is not funded for FY21, and that was where this all began, was that it wasn't funded, but it's in our code. I'm not sure of the legalities of that, and I'm comfortable saying we could go forward just taking a risk position on whether or not we have that assistant fire chief. But I'll go back to my time in the military, and I know that anytime you remove a billet, it's tough to get that billet back. And that's my concern is, yes, the language is here for as many other positions as may be necessary, but I see moving forward that would mean essentially the makeup of my fire chief staff, or I'm sorry, the fire hall staff would have to be done at budget time every year instead of having a staff that I could continually modify.
Dr. Wayne?
You can ask the assembly for an additional FTE. You don't have to do it yearly. With the assistant chief out, then you do have more leeway to make an appropriate plan. If you do look up how much overtime is, you need to also examine historic overtime, and that means over years, not just when we didn't have an assistant. So you need some context and comparison in order to do that. So if you're going to take the task, I'm going to ask you to dig just a couple of inches deeper. And Mr. Mosier said something prophetic. Well, what will the landscape look like? Well, as I'm on the landscape committee, tree and landscape, and they've cut back enormously, and so has the basic maintenance around the city. So what will the landscape look like? Just walk around our lovely Sitka and see where cutbacks have been made in maintenance to the city. So those are just thoughts.
Other comments from the assembly? Cole?
Just make a quick point that I didn't make before, that by taking this out of the legislation, we're greatly increasing the likelihood we won't have this position. It's the nature of the beast. And public safety is kind of job one of a municipality. And I think by not having this position, we noticeably reduce it. So.
Other comments from the assembly? Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-27 on second and final reading, Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
No.
Mr. Christensen?
No.
Mr. Eisenbeiß?
No.
Mayor Paxton?
No.
And Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Okay, the motion fails, 3-4.
Paxton, we take 5?
Pardon me?
Can we take 5?
Yeah, okay, we're going to take 5, please. We're now item G. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve ordinance, sorry. Thought I was there. I move to approve ordinance 2020-30 on second and final reading, authorizing the city to obtain a loan from the Alaska Municipal Bond Bank in a principal amount not to exceed $7 million to refinance for savings the city's outstanding loan from the Alaska Energy Authority, authorizing the issuance to the bond bank of a junior lien electric revenue refunding of the city to evidence and secure the loan, authorizing the municipal administrator and chief finance and administrative officer to enter into a loan agreement with the bond bank, setting forth the terms and conditions of the loan and the refunding bond, and establishing the effective date.
Second.
Public comment? It's back to the assembly. Yes, Dr. Wayne.
I know we discussed this last time, and just to refresh everybody's memory, this is $7 million for a refinance of some bonds that are callable, which are coming up, and it's going to go through the Alaska Bond Bank. Apparently, we will get about 1%, and that will equal savings to the city to about $50,000 a year. I do have one simple question for Jay, and that is, with the prior bonds, we had a hold for 10 years before we had the ability to refinance. How long, if we do refinance, do we have to hold these bonds before we have any maneuvering room?
Good evening, Mayor Paxton, Dr. Ween, Assembly members. Let me first clarify that we are not refinancing bonds, but we're refinancing a loan. This was a loan the municipality took out in 1979 to finance the Green Lake Dam. But in answer to your question, sir, when we refinance that loan with bond proceeds, it will again be 10 years before those bonds can be called. And we do have the ability, though, as we do with our current bonds, to defease them fully at a time prior to 10 years.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Since the last time we had the brokers up here, how has interest rates been doing? Have they been going down?
They've been slightly tending upwards.
So
But
may
we are still in a position that this makes sense.
Okay, good. Call for the vote, please.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-30 on second and final reading, Mr. Eisenbeiß?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
And Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item G.
We are now at item H. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve ordinance 2020-28 on second and final reading, establishing the CARES Act Utilities Subsidization Program.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the assembly. Assembly comment? Call for the vote.
I think all the comment
Oh, I'm
was
sorry.
necessary was made at the last meeting.
Okay,
So
good.
no use repeating it.
Pardon? Yeah, if there's public comment, come up. Sorry, didn't.
Thank you again, members of this assembly. My name is Tom Gamble. I wanted to make some suggestions on the CARES Act. I did start to say that I missed the last meeting because it was called on short notice. And it raises a point that I'd like to make, in that utilities, while they are important to people, technology is equally important in this time. And we shouldn't exclude or make this CARES Act funding so refined and apply it just to utilities. When we talk about hardship as described, I see a lot of the technical language is what's required by law. But the people who were impacted were not only impacted by utilities, they fell short on food and beverages. Some people needed clothing, they weren't able to work. Transportation costs, city fees. I can't stress enough that possible situations for rent while jobs were being changed and altered, finances being maneuvered, people's livelihoods were being impacted. One of the recommendations I would make for the city, again, is to coordinate efforts, because the Sitka Tribe of Alaska and others in the region will be also accepting portions of CARES Act funding. How much do you have in common as shared citizens of the same city when you say there are 3,000 members of the tribe living within the confines of the city government? It looks to me like there should be a collaborative effort to be able to join forces. And hopefully under government consultation, these conversations are happening. I'm unaware as a personal private citizen to the events as they unfold. But I'll give an example. The Navajo Nation is using their CARES Act funding for infrastructure in the form of water, because they have justified that water is a necessity for their people. And we have an issue here called the Blue Lake Dam, which is also water related. And one of the ways that I would like to recommend our city to spend this money is to first take a look at what's owed at that dam, and can portions of the CARES Act funds be used to offset what's owed. And then let's take a look at the subsidy program and what hardships people have left. After we reduce those rates that have increased astronomically to the point where some of these people, if you're paying those amounts that we're paying for utilities in other community, we're financing a home. We have a mortgage for land and property and a home. And that's the reason why people are leaving. So when you take a look at the CARES Act funding, I hope you take a look at the impacts that have been caused by the Blue Lake Dam, and justify that that was the first real emergency that we had here in Sitka. And then we had a pandemic that really messed us over. So I feel for everyone who's struggling. I don't know if this is even possible, but I applaud the efforts of the city to be able to accept this money and disperse it not only to the utilities, but if anybody comes in with a hardship, do your best you can to just acknowledge that it was a hardship without much explanation. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Just for the record, yeah, Lisa Gassman is on the committee from STA. We meet with them on a weekly basis to be sure we're coordinating on this.
Actually, we're meeting twice a week.
Twice a
And-
week,
And
I'm
Lisa
sorry.
Gassman is part of that collaborative effort.
Since we actually started that in mid-April, and we're still eating.
And it should be pointed out that those funds are very restrictive in how you can use them. And as I understand it, the Blue Lake Dam situation wasn't a cause or a thing because of COVID. And I don't believe, I think we've been told by our finance director that we can't use it for that.
That's her effort. And for the record, we may be chasing ourselves, but we, Blue Lake Dam and the Green Lake Dam, both complex issues, but they are highest on our priority, working with our lobbyists and on trying to get funding for those. Yeah, Tor.
I was gonna say, I thank Valerie for bringing up, I was gonna say the same thing, we can't use it for Blue Lake. I also wanna say that there's about 10 million, this is not all of the CARES Act money by any stretch. There's approximately $10 million left over budgeted from after this. So, there's, like I said, the committee is already working on a lot of the stuff you were talking about.
Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-28 on second and final reading, Mayor Paxton,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbaz,
Yes.
Dr. Ween,
Yes.
and Ms. Nelson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on item H.
And now, excuse me,
I move to approve ordinance 2020-29 on second and final reading, establishing the CARES Act mortgage costs subsidization program.
Second.
public comment? Back to the assembly? Valerie.
I just have maybe a little technical question in that this only applies to mortgage that people are paying to the city. There is at least one other small boat harbor that has quite a few charter fishermen and fishing boats in it out at the cove. And I don't know if we would be getting ourselves in danger legally by, you know, discriminating against those people that are paying mortgage. They're still in the city of Sitka, and you can bet that they've been impacted a heck of a lot more. A lot of them are still waiting to go out fishing. They're being boarded by the state troopers to make sure that their passengers or clients or whatever have had their negative test, and none of them are going to be able to recoup what they've already lost this season. and probably won't do very good for the rest of the season, especially with all the cruise ships canceling.
Noted. Right, other comments? Yes, Steve?
I'd just like to repeat my request from the last meeting that if the Assembly is going to start to section off chunks of this money that are allocated towards certain segments of the population, that we hand this over to the CARES Act working group for thorough consideration and to make sure that it falls within the entire plan that they are looking at.
Concur. Other comments? Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-29 on second and final reading, Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mr. Eisenbeiß?
No.
The motion passes 6-1 on item I.
Item J, motion please.
I move to approve ordinance 2020-31 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2021, CARES Act funding, utilities, and mortgage accounts.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the Assembly. Dr. Ween?
I made my thoughts known at the last meeting, and but I will bring up one point, and I don't know how these funds were calculated.
Other comments from the Assembly? Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-31 on second and final reading, Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeiß?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
And Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item J.
We are now at item K. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve ordinance 2020-32 on first reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2020 secure rural school support.
Second.
Public comment? Yes.
Hi, I'm Amy Morrison with the Sitka School Board. And I know you guys have received a letter from Dr. Wagner about this, and I just wanted to kind of add a couple of comments about it. What we are asking for with this funds is, and obviously I can only speak on behalf of myself and not my fellow board members, but in our budget cycle this year, there were 2 positions that were unfunded that we tried every way we possibly could to get money for and figure out a way, and we just couldn't. And those are 2 mental health counselor positions. We would like to have a full-time social worker in every school, and we don't have one currently at Pacific High School or at Blatchley Middle School. So it was a pretty unanimous decision by the school board that if we could get, extra funds, that is where those funds would go. That's roughly in the ballpark of about $200,000 to fund those positions. So I ask that you pass this and that this money go to the school. And like I said, we would have to obviously have a meeting to decide where to spend it, but I can tell you that I'm pretty certain that that is where the money would go, so.
Amy, I will tell you, we've already cut over $2 million out of our budget. School districts have been pretty well fully funded. So we recognize the need and we support the school, but we probably get anywhere from $4 to $7 million of tax shortfall in the this year and next year.
Yep,
Thank
understood.
you very much.
And, I'll just add too, really, our decision was made prior to the whole COVID-19 thing. That has added a whole other element of need for social work in the schools. So I'll just add that too. So thank you
ma'am.
for your time.
Right. Other comments from the public?
Evening, Mayor and Assembly members. Eric Van Sice, Sitka School Board Clerk. Again, just asking for consideration. I realize that there's many uses for these funds. Historically, in the past, there has been a split for these funds. This year is unique. We did a outreach through the Leave Your Print program to get community input for our strategic plan, and had very good success. Those people that run that organization
came to Sitka and indicated that our response and the way all that occurred was very good compared to other outlying other places that have been utilizing it. And what did come through is it shows in your packet that mental health counseling, social workers where they're deemed appropriate, and counselors to fill in the gaps for our district. And again, this was pre-COVID. We're looking for some good, a lot of times in middle school, right now we've got a half-time PE teacher, counselor, and there can be some challenges when somebody is a counselor with a child maybe in the morning, but then they have to be the teacher or disciplinarian to that same child in the afternoon. We're also trying to gain some continuity where the middle school typically is where it happens at all ages, but the middle school, some of the challenges that can occur. And if we can have early intervention and continuity of care for those students who move on to either Pacific High School or Sitka High School, those counselors in place can continue that care. And lastly, what we have not done an official outreach, but just our own outreach with community members. We know that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg as far as the social and mental health stress that's been occurring for the kids and the parents. So we understand dollars are tight, but we would ask your support in this, if at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Comments from the public? Back to the assembly. Yes. Sorry, George.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. For the record, my name is George Paul. I'm a licensed practical nurse. I've been working in the medical field since 1999. I would like to put these two thoughts before you. The activities of the protests and everything going on regarding that slaying, and then the COVID-19. Our youngsters are going to need a lot of assistance in formulating their personalities and understanding the situation of the world. So I would speak strongly in support of giving this money for the purpose of counselors, and consider down the line finding more money, because I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. PTSD is going to be big soon. And when we're talking youngsters, helping them formulate a positive, keep myself going, working thought process is going to be a high priority in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Yes.
Good evening, I'm Rachel Moreno. I have a child at Blatchley, a special needs child, and it's hard enough to be put in the position to become an instant overnight teacher, let alone explain to my child why he can't go to school, why he can't be with his friends, why he can't be in his classes. And to even begin to explain to him that if he should get COVID-19, and he should get very, very ill and have to be put in the hospital, why we cannot be with him, why we cannot go through the process of him being hospitalized, not being able to see us until and if he survives COVID-19. That fear and that uncertainty that this situation brings to our children is very real, it's very scary, and it's very difficult as a parent to even think about trying to explain to our children. So if we put counselors in the schools, our children have that much more opportunity to hopefully come out of this with a better sense of safety and security. I would never, if I were in your position or on the school board, ever consider not supporting our children's physical, emotional, and mental well-being during all of this. This is crucial. This is the time and opportunity now to do the right thing for them. We can't go back next year when you look at a budget like this or someone brings up a resolution like this. You can't go back and say, oh gosh, maybe we should have put more counselors in the schools, because we have so many children reacting and responding to this situation with very difficult negative outcomes. So I would implore you to approve this and do it now as a means of supporting parents, supporting the students, and supporting the healthy outcome of our community when we come through this pandemic. So I speak in support of it.
Thank you, ma'am. Other comments from the public? Back to the assembly. Mr. Mosier.
I see this as a 50-50 split. I know it wasn't in this budget for this year, but I don't mind. I think it's, you know, I agree with you, though. We have been very generous with the school district, and I do have to say, I don't think, like, if I were to vote against it, I don't think it would mean, or anybody who votes against this means they don't care, because I think every member of this assembly cares very deeply for the children and wants to support them. But we're trying to look at the big picture of all the numbers. That being said, I'm probably going to vote for it because I think it's fair to split it 50-50. We kind of have, so.
Valerie.
Because this is first reading, I'm inclined to vote for it, but I will take the next 2 weeks between meetings to reach out to others to see what their thoughts are. And I appreciate Ms. Moreno's testimony about the youth. They aren't the only ones that are affected, though. I have a mother that's held hostage in the Pioneer Home. I've written the governor twice, no response. She can't speak on the phone, so I haven't seen her since February. She tries to call, but she can't talk because she's got a disease that affects that. And so we all are suffering. We all have our own burdens. And like I say, I'll vote on this for first reading, and I want to hear, you know, if there's other testimony after it gets reported in the paper that we're doing this. Thank you.
Mr. Christensen.
Yeah, I just mean, a couple of quick points. First of all, I mean, this is secure rural schools, and I realize we don't have to use it for schools, but that is kind of the point of the thing. I mean, and I know in roads, but uniquely to this with the counselor position, I think the fact that we can't use CARES Act money for this, which is really frustrating, because that would be the first place I would go to. But because the CARES Act money has to be spent by the end of the year, we can't use it for this, which is, I mean, because that would be, I think, a little more as appropriate for that. But I would argue that, especially, you know, the middle-aged schools, I mean, mentally going to middle school is is an emotional washing machine or roller coaster, whatever metaphor you want to use, no matter in normal times. But I know I interact with a fair number of middle schoolers these days, and they're dealing, but it's going to be a real issue come school year. So I would say, A, this isn't normal times, and B, that, well, this money, we weren't expecting it, that splitting it half with the school district, especially for this purpose, I think is appropriate.
Yes, Dr. Wayne.
Well, Valerie said she'll vote yes for it this time and consider as things unfold, we'll see what it is in 2 weeks. This time I'm going to vote no. And the reason I will vote no is that the schools, and I know it has been mentioned before, has been funded to the cap and has been given and then some. And so I feel that the assembly, I'll say, has done its duty, and the school budget also is the school board's duty in how they allocate funding. My notion is that with the Rural Schools Act, it is actually a misnomer because you can use it for roads. And that's kind of an odd combo, I would think, but that is the legal fact. My notion is, I hear, and I'll call it an opinion because I want to hear, I'll say, a legal determination about whether the schools, what the schools would be eligible for mitigation in the CARES Act. Because I had heard a number of the meetings at the school board, they want computers for everybody. That is something that can be asked for. That was a budget wish. And I believe that there are a lot of other things that the CARES Act can be used for, including mental health mitigation. And so I am going to need to hear what a legal opinion is if the school board actually got together and investigated what they can access from the CARES Act, which I certainly would support. And I don't know what the work group is doing, but I would advise the school board members that are here and parents to get them to really figure out how much can be gotten. And in my reading of the rules so far, I think the school system can do very well. And so that is the one part, because the school can ask for CARES funds. And I believe that that's true, and I'm happy to change my opinion when I get a legal opinion that it's not. But the city can't utilize CARES for loss of revenue or any other shortfalls. At this moment in time, that's a fact. So my suggestion is, in the next 2 weeks, get the school board to investigate exactly what they can and can't get from the CARES Act and present it to us as the Assembly and see where things shake out. But right now, if you look at our roads, I would rather have the $229,000 because we can't find it anywhere else. I would rather have that money go to the care of our roads because we don't have any alternatives at this moment, meaning the city. But the school board may, and it may find a very good solution to this for their needs, and I'll say, and then some, because it looked, to my reading, the CARES Act had a lot of opening for the very things that were spoken about tonight. Thank you.
We've deferred Lincoln Street maintenance for 2 years now. And again, we cut our budget by 10% because of the COVID stuff. And so I think we all care about our school system and our children, and we're committed to that. But that's my concern, and you'll see my vote in a little bit. Anybody else?
I've got a question
Kevin,
about some
please.
of the history around the secure rural schools. And if I'm wrong about my recollection about this, all the years that I've been on the Assembly that we've received secure rural schools funding, we have, historically, we have done the split. Is that right? Because Jay's probably the best one to answer that.
I can answer that question while Jay comes up here, but that is historically correct. The anomaly this year is that we were not expecting any funding for FY20, and we're talking about FY20 Secure Rural Schools money. And in the letter that we sent to the, as required for the receipt of the school district's budget, it says, at this point, we do not anticipate receiving Secure Rural Schools funding in FY20. Should Secure Rural Schools be received by the municipality, the Assembly will determine how the funds will be split. Also, for the FY21 budget, and Jay, if you give me a north-south head nod here, I believe we have the 50-50 agreement in for the FY21 budget should funds be received. The anomaly is we did not expect them for 20, so it was not agreed upon.
There's been a number of years that we haven't actually expected it, or it's been really ambiguous whether or not Congress would.
Other comments?
I guess just for myself, I am going to lean on that history and look to the shared portion of this with the school district.
Other comments from the assembly? Yeah, please.
Although I'm voting for this, I just want to put things in perspective too. Next year, because I know that, you know, if this passes first and second reading, and positions are hired, would like the leaders of the school district, the administrator and the board to also realize, you know, we'll have to make those decisions next year at budget time based on the situation on the ground and what our finances are. In the past, there's been times where I've been told, and then my recent experience is when you have to cut, then we look like the bad guys. But I'm looking forward to an adult conversation next year, come budget time, that we don't try to be dramatic, but come together as adults and make the best decision that works as best as we can for everyone.
Yes.
One problem, and that's a correction, and that is I would like to clear up an inadequacy, and I'm so sorry that if children, young adults, are thinking that they are enormously susceptible to COVID, and the truth is that they are not. And I know there's been a bombardment of media on this, which has everybody fearful. But when you start to look at the actual data that's coming out after 5 months, you can see a much different story emerge. And that is people under 50 years old are pretty gifted in not getting it, being asymptomatic, and certainly not dying from it. In New York City, the average age, and they were the hot spot for this country, was 83. And virtually all of them had comorbidities, meaning hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, etc. So I feel that you can't go around I don't know how that is rectified with our current media situation, but those people who can hear my voice to know that this has been pretty gifted for children. And that is in contradistinction to the 1918 epidemic, where children were really suffering from the epidemic. But COVID is not that way. And I think as we get more information, we will find out that it is much, much better than we thought. So I would recommend the kids, like I see at the basketball court, to get out there and do some layups. Thank you.
Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-32 on first reading, Dr. Ween?
No.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeiß?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
No.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
The motion passes 5-2 on first reading. Item K.
We're now at item L. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve ordinance 2020-33 on first reading, amending Title IV Revenue and Finance of the Sitka General Code by revising Chapter 4.09 Sales Tax relating to an exemption certificate.
Second.
Public comment? Assembly. Valerie.
We brought this up earlier this year that I think it was Shirley from Stereo North that, you know, had the issues with not having the retail exemption thing, so she couldn't get products from out of town. And we met with the attorney in February, and because of everything that's been going on, it's just now getting on the agenda. But this just clears up the code to where our businesses can get those resale exemptions every year, I think, as long as they're, you know, current with their sales tax, and I think it speaks for itself. Thank you.
Again, I'd like to clarify that the city never really demanded these. This is purely because the vendors are asking for it. when you're buying from somebody down south, they want to have your sales tax exemption certificate number, and we didn't have one. So now we do, and it's free, so.
Other comments from the Assembly? Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-33 on first reading, Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbais?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mr. Knox?
Yes.
And the motion passes 7-0 on item L.
We are now at item M.
I'd like to make a motion.
Pardon me?
I'd like to make a motion.
Please make a motion.
As it relates to the Fisheries Enhancement Fund and the division of those funds, I would like to allocate $23,000 to the Sitka Sound Science Center, $10,000 to Alpha, and $5,000 to ATA.
Second.
I need help here. If I want to make a friendly amendment, can I do that?
Mr. Mayor, I think the clerk has something to say.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Right.
Well, the motion is certainly warranted. In the packet, we had steps lined out, and the applicants, I advised them that they would have 5 minutes to present first.
We have a motion in a second. We could go ahead and have them talk
fine.
about it.
The motion has been moved, seconded. If there are, I guess, special reports or persons to be heard, this is the time.
A second, so we could go ahead for evidence to be heard.
Well, I guess, Mayor, if you would like each of the applicants to present, or do you want to go ahead and vote on this? It's a little different than what I advised the applicants of, so I just want to.
Why can't they make their,
Right.
we have a motion?
They can, yeah, they can.
Thank you,
That's
Valerie.
great. I just want some direction.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so they're participating by phone.
Thanks, Bill.
All three are?
Yes, and then, Matt, I believe you were gonna also speak. Is that correct?
Yeah, so is Jerem.
Okay. Let's see here. The first person to speak will be Lisa Bush with Sitka Sound Science Center. Dr. Ween, what were the amounts again? 28?
It was actually,
23?
it was 23 Sitka Sound, 10
Hi, this is Lisa.
Alpha, and 5 Alaska Trawlers.
Okay. Lisa, hi, it's Sarah.
Hi.
Hi. So I just want to advise you, so a motion, the process is a little different than what I originally described to you over the phone. So a motion has been made to award $23,000 to the Sitka Sound Science Center, $10,000 to Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association, and $5,000 to Alaska Trollers Association. So that motion's been made, but now is an opportunity for you to have your 5 minutes to speak to your proposal and the motion itself.
So do I start talking now?
Yes. Go ahead.
Because I'm listening on the radio, it sounds delayed, but I will turn the radio off.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Lisa Bush, and I'm the Executive Director of the Sitka Sound Science Center. I'd like to begin by saying that we are on Tlingit Ani. The Tlingit people have been indigenous to the land for 10,000 years, and I'd like to thank the Tlingit people for their stewardship. These are extremely challenging times for our community, for our organization, and for me personally. Between the pandemic and the repairs that need to be made to reverse racism, some days I am quite overwhelmed and not sure how to keep moving. In this time of uncertainty and unrest, there is little that provides comfort But to be honest, and though I know it sounds a little corny, what helps me move forward now is looking at what is right in front of me. The work that's being done at the Sitka Sound Science Center is heartening. Through our science research and science education mission, we're helping by teaching people how to validate, think critically, and innovate, by conducting research that helps us understand the world. We're providing tools to build a better world. Fisheries enhancement is part of this work. Thank you for the opportunity to submit an application to the Fisheries Enhancement Fund. Over the last 10 years, with support from the Fish Box Tax, Sitka Sound Science Center has created a strong fisheries enhancement program, promoted Alaska aquaculture to visitors, expanded our educational opportunities to Sitka students, and added to the common property fishery, benefiting commercial, sport, and subsistence fishermen. Fisheries Enhancement Fund. The voters approved this fish box tax on guided sport fishermen because they wanted these people to help enhance the fisheries of Sitka Sound. Though commercial fishermen most certainly benefit from our operation, they've caught our hatchery salmon worth millions of dollars over the past 10 years, they don't actually pay us to do fishery enhancement. The fish box tax is a way for us to recoup the costs associated with putting fish in the water. We believe our hatchery program is exactly what the voters intended. The Science Center hatchery enhances the fisheries for the widest breadth of the community. Children and elders can fish from Sage Beach or the Seawalk, subsistence, guided sport, commercial, gear groups of all kinds, land, Sheldon Jackson hatchery fish. Unlike the other applicants, we are not an advocacy group. We are a nonprofit 501c3. We've created 18 full-time year-round positions, and we have another, in a normal summer, we hire 12 to 15 seasonals. Our educational programs are helping to launch a new generation of STEM-educated workforce. Our aquarium and hatchery usually bring visitors, and we attract researchers from around the nation. Like you, like our neighbors, we're worried about payroll. We're concerned about paying for our operations. We wonder how we will weather this economic storm. Since March, our team has spent countless late nights thinking about how we can keep our people employed, open up our facilities to the public, and continue to offer our services. We help the school district deliver online content. We're helping researchers work remotely. Our hatchery workers are considered essential workers because they're involved in food production. So we've thought a lot about how we can keep them safe while they continue to come to work. My hands, my cold hands, are testament to the bold moves we're making. We've turned off the heat. We've cut back on supplies and canceled outside contracts as we continue to look for ways to earn revenue, develop new educational tools, and research projects. We've turned over every rock to keep our facility operational, and this funding stream, because of its intention, truly makes a difference to us. And that's why we have respectfully requested $38,000. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, next.
Okay, next I will call Linda Benkin with the Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association.
Hello, this is Linda.
Hi, Linda. It's Sarah Peterson calling from the Assembly meeting.
Great. I think I'm all ready to go if you're ready for me.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know the process is a little different than what we explained on the phone. So a motion has been made. Have you been listening?
I have.
Okay,
yeah.
great. So
Thank
you know
for
where you're.
explaining this.
Okay, perfect. So you know where we're at. So I'll let you go ahead.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to present tonight. I'm Linda Benkin, Executive Director of the Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association. Our mission is to promote sustainable fisheries and thriving fishing communities through policy engagement, collaborative research, and innovative programs that improve resource health and the viability of our small boat fisheries. We enhance opportunities for Sitka fishermen and the community of Sitka through integrated programming that includes a strong focus on young people looking to get a start in local fisheries. Some weeks ago, I provided you with a written report detailing how the City of Sitka's investment in Alpha's work was leveraged through partnerships and outside funding over the past year to strengthen our young fishermen programs. I also included detail on how Alpha will invest fishery enhancement funds in 2020 if awarded. Just to hit a few of the highlights, in 2019, we received a vocational grant from the Alaska Community Foundation to expand our crew apprentice program, our Sitka Fishermen Expos, which provide training and education to all fishermen in Sitka, but always with special focus on our young fishermen and entry-level fishermen. Over the past year, in partnership with the Alaska Sustainable Fisheries Trust, we also were able to place $1.5 million in program-related investment loans to assist young fishermen with purchasing halibut and sablefish quota to get a start in our fisheries. Not in the report, but an effort that we started this spring to provide seafood to people in need in Sitka, working with the mutual aid program and delivering that seafood, picking it up from the processors and delivering it to families in need, as well as food banks here in town, with support from the Sitka Legacy Fund, Slow Foods, and 28 individual donors. We've also maintained an almost daily updated website with regular outreach to fishermen throughout the community, detailing COVID-19 mandates, requirements, assistance programs, and other information to assist fishermen through the pandemic, who, as essential workers, continued to operate through the pandemic despite a lot of restrictions on those operations and dramatically reduced prices for fish. With support from the City Fishery Enhancement Fund for the remainder of 2020, we'll continue to keep fishermen well advised on pandemic requirements and assistance opportunities, grow our direct-to-consumer marketing program to provide ongoing price support for local fishermen as we work through the pandemic, expand our fishermen training and education programs with particular emphasis on the young and entry-level fishermen using online platforms if that's what's appropriate, expand our crew apprentice program, and mentor our local fish fund borrowers as they enter the fisheries as quota shareholders. In summary, we consider the work we're doing to assist fishermen through the pandemic important to enhancing Sitka's fisheries. We also view our Young Fishermen's Initiative to be both fundamental to our mission and critical to the future of Sitka's fisheries. Last year, we leveraged your investment in Alpha and our Fisheries Trust to secure over $600,000 in grants and contracts, and we're on track to do even better in 2020. We welcome and appreciate your ongoing support of our work, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Okay. No questions? Okay, next. ATA.
Okay, yep, next I will call Amy with ATA.
Okay.
This is Amy.
Hi, Amy. It's Sarah Peterson calling from the Assembly meeting.
Great.
Hi.
Are we ready?
Yes. Yep.
Close?
Yep, go ahead. You have 5 minutes to present speak to your proposal.
Okay, wonderful. Hi, members of the Sitka Assembly. My name is Amy Doherty, and I'm the director of the Alaska Trollers Association. I'm speaking to you from Juneau. As many of you know by now, in January, the Wild Fish Conservancy filed their intention to sue NMFS over our troll fishery. Then, true to their word, they filed a lawsuit and then an injunction on top of that. On this, I have some late-breaking news that we just heard. So far, the Wild Fish Conservancy was not successful with their injunction to shut us down. So it looks like we can fish this year. But I have to be specific. What just occurred is this. The magistrate who is tasked with producing a findings and recommendations report for the district court judge in Seattle has recommended that the injunction not occur. So this is great news, but we're far from out of the woods, so to speak, and presuming that the judge accepts her recommendations. So we still have the lawsuit to contend with. And this hasn't been resolved for us, only in the short term. Which brings me to, hopefully you have in front of you a packet of information that we submitted to request a donation from the city of Sitka. The ATA board voted unanimously to intervene about 7 weeks ago, and for this I'm very proud of our board. Despite the challenges and risks, they decided we had to fight back because we're the organization that represents trollers, and it was the right thing to do. The Wild Fish Conservancy is well-financed and known to be a fringe and opportunist environmental organization. Meanwhile, ATA had $2,800 in its legal account when we voted to intervene. We've received donations from many trollers and also from Petersburg and Craig. We are now requesting $5K in funds from you. Sitka, as you're probably aware, has the largest troll fleet anywhere in the state. While we would prefer not to step on any toes, we view this request as an emergency in nature. Have not brought our attorney on board this teleconference, so I'm hoping either I or one of the Sitka ATA board members who will testify later can answer any questions you have that I can't. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay.
We're now ready for public comment. Public comment?
Is this on? Good evening, Matt Donahoe. I'm the president of the Alaska Troller Association. There's somewhat of about 1,000 trollers that get permits every year and fish out here between Dixon Entrance and Yakutat. And they all pay 3% to the aquaculture associations, both NSRA and SARA. I don't know if you guys have seen it. There was an interview with Amy and the executive director of the Wild Fish Conservancy on KTUU Anchorage, Channel 2, a couple of days ago. And the executive director of the Wild Fish Conservancy said he thinks that the fishermen could go fish in inside waters and on the rivers. First, you got to think about what that means for a town like Sitka. You know, take the 1,000 fishermen off the ocean and troll up the rivers. These people don't know what they're talking about at all. So for 40 years, I'm not sure exact amount, ever since the fishermen taxed themselves, the 3% aquaculture, I've been paying in, I don't know how many thousands of dollars I've paid in to aquaculture over those 40 years, 40 some odd years. And Jim Moore is sitting behind me, has done the same thing. And that's, if you take those fishermen off the water, they're not going to have any income to contribute to NSRA, which is the largest producer of salmon in Alaska, or in Southeast Alaska. So we we trollers very much contribute to enhanced fish. If the fishery is eliminated, and this, make no mistake, this is a challenge to the existence of the fishery. There's really good news about the recommendation and finding. That's the official thing. It's findings and recommendation. The judge is a magistrate, so she is first year on her bench, starting her second year. And this is a complicated issue that I don't think she understands. But she ruled in our favor on the injunction. We just found this out just a couple of hours ago. So that's great. But we still have the lawsuit, and we have to pay for it. ATA is the only entity from the state of Alaska that stepped into the breach here. And we did it, out of our own pockets. The board ponied up $6,600 on a teleconference, just the guys there. I'm really proud of them. So please consider and vote to support this $5,000. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Other comments from the public? Back to this. Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Jim Moore. I'm former president of Alaska Trollers Association, and I also currently sit on the board of directors for NSRA and for Armstrong Kita. I want to say that I really, really appreciate the work that is done at Sitka Sound Science Center and Alpha. We work with these people and really, really appreciate what they do. I was greatly heartened to hear the news that Amy and Matt referred to with this injunction. Looks like the recommendations are going to be for the judge that's going to come in for him not to hit us with the injunction. But as Matt said, the lawsuit is still ahead of us, and we don't know. It may be a long, long road to hoe. I'm almost certain that the presence of fishermen that in this lawsuit during this injunction made a difference. It was not just National Marine Fisheries Service versus, we were part of the suit, and I'm certain it made a difference. And so I just want to say that I appreciate all that you are doing, and I hope that you fund this.
Thank you, sir. Okay, it's back to the assembly. Yeah, Valerie.
We have a letter dated May 29th from Renee Wheat. And on page 1, it says, the Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association and the Alaska Trollers Association proposals do not include the required pro forma financials. By the terms of the advertisement, the proposals do not meet the requirements. And then I go to the advertisement, and it says the proposal should contain the following information. It doesn't say shall, so I feel that all proposals are acceptable to me. Thank you.
I'll just let the bag go. I think I'd like to double the amount that we're giving the Alaska Trollers Association.
I like that idea too.
So do I.
Pardon me? Yeah, I mean, that's.
I'll move to an amendment.
Well, that's.
If you listen, Dr. Wing wants to talk first.
Be a friendly amendment.
It depends on how and where the money is going to be moved. I certainly have no objection to an amendment, but I would like to, I'll say, probe it a little more.
Well, you're.
The reason I chose these funds is because that is what the organizations asked for. And I understand that each have different needs, and the fisheries are a dynamic organization, and by that is everything is interwoven, and there are lots of moving parts, and whether it is the hatcheries that view themselves as fishery enhancement, or whether it is Alpha and dealing with young fishermen and supporting that as part of the wonderful puzzle of the fisheries, or whether it's ATA you have to remember ATA has been supported in past years, but this year appears to be one of greater urgency because of threats to the actual, it was mentioned by Matt that it is a challenge to the existence of the fishery. And so I think all of them are absolutely worthy. And it really boils down to how will these funds be apportioned. And my only notion was like to share. And this is what the organizations asked for, meaning that Alpha asked for 10, ATA asked for 5, and so the arithmetic is pretty simple, which left more than 50% for the good work of the Sitka Sound Science Center.
Valerie.
And I would say, I don't, has an amendment been made? I would say if one is made, that I would find it hard to vote for increasing what's been asked for. We would be setting a dangerous precedent, I think, for the other grants and programs where people request and then we give somebody more because it's a different situation. I think that's not good. Thank you.
I was going to say, I understand and respect what you're saying, Valerie, but I don't think this lawsuit hadn't come forth yet when they applied for it. And I think that we have an existential threat going on here with this lawsuit that, and we happen to have this fund to be allowed to do it. So I think it warrants something a little outside the lines. I won't make a motion here because I want to throw it out to people. I was kind of doodling here thinking if we take ATA to 8,000 and Sitka Sound Science Center to 16,000, that allows us to do 10,000 for the Longline Fishermen Association to 8,000. I misspoke there. And so it allows us to take the Trollers Association to 10,000. I mean, like I said, this is unusual. I mean, and it is a real threat. And I think we would also need to take into account that if this lawsuit passes, I don't think it'd be just the trollers, it'd be the charter guys too. So we would lose a lot more than $5,000 in sales tax if that's or $10,000 in sales tax if this, not to mention the fact that the fish box tax wouldn't be available if the trollers get shut, if the charter fleet gets shut down.
What were you saying, Tor? You said thinking 10 for Alaska Trollers, 8 for Longline, and then how much for Sitka Sound?
No, it's 20.
What's that?
It's 20 because take 3 away from Sitka Sound and 2 away from Alpha equals 5, and that's the 10.
I like, that's good.
20 and 8. Yeah, sorry, I was trying to listen.
I'll make an amendment to that. I'll make an amendment to change the amounts to what Tor said, Sitka Sound Science Center 20,000, Alaska Trollers Association 10, and the Longline Association 8,000.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the assembly. Valerie.
So I guess I've got a question. Why are we increasing above what they're asking for? I guess I'm confused, or if I missed something there, I'm not really sure why.
Well, because, I mean, Craig ponied up, sorry, it just.
First, when the last time they were sitting here, telling us of what they were going through, they were not prepared to really ask for money, and it came up, and they said, well, how much do you want? And I think Jim said 10, and Matt said 5, and they just said 5. It was a pretty arbitrary thing, Kevin. It wasn't, they aren't as used to this as Sitka Sound Science Centers and Alpha is, and so they were looking for whatever they could get. Again, my concern for raising interest is I think it is a real threat to our fisheries if this lawsuit does not get beat, and so that's why. But if I'm wrong about that, and it's.
I'd also say, Kevin, that
Yeah, so.
the lawsuit hadn't come forth when the application for
Right.
this was put out.
Valerie.
I have to vote no because it says proposals received after the time fixed for receipt will not be considered. It doesn't say may not, it says will not. And so now we're saying, oh, because they found out that they're going to have this more going on. I mean, they got some good news. Give them the 5,000 that they requested and later on figure it out, because I think we're going to get in trouble legally if we're doing this and doing that, and because of the way the advertisement's written. Thank you.
Noted. I think the Assembly has ability to make judgments as we do these kind of things. Yeah.
I'd like to point out, I mean, I'm just actually surprised that we're not, I mean, we could lose a whole fishery. I mean, and us putting up 10,000 even is nothing. I mean, legal bills can go like that, and who knows what kind of bank account these people have. It's a real, like Tor said, existential threat to our town. We need to be funding them as much as possible. So I don't care if we did everything by the right, dotting our I's and crossing our T's and deadlines. They need money, and they need it right now. I mean, Craig ponied up 2,500, and we can't even, they're a really small town, and we can't even do 10,000. I really think we should do 10,000 for them.
Anyway, it's an amendment. We want to call for the vote on the amendment?
Go.
Does the public get to comment on the amendment before you vote?
I thought he already called for public.
Yeah, the public comment is already had. Yeah. Or had public comment.
For the public comment, have we been able to touch back with, I mean, is Lisa and, are the applicants still on the phone, or? Because, I mean, I know they're not, most of them aren't there in person, so we need to call them back.
I would need to call them back. They're not on the line. Mayor, would you like me to call them back?
Question. All right, sorry, go ahead.
I happen to agree with Valerie. This is how things are advertised, and the precedent that is set, I think, is something that is dangerous. But we should not forget that the Assembly, based on the needs of ATA and how the suit is going, cannot approach the Assembly again for an additional appropriation. So as it's presented today, I think we are within that letter, and I would like to leave the door open for the future. I just don't want to get, tangled up in blue, as Bob Dylan said. And by the way, if you have a $300 attorney, it's only 17 hours worth of work, which ain't a heck of a lot in a case like this, which may go to litigation. So my notion is that I'm going to have to vote no, not because I don't necessarily agree for the increased funds, but because of the, and I thank Valerie for doing that on-the-run research. So the door is open.
Noted.
Call the question on the amendment.
Pardon me?
I call the question on the amendment.
Wait a minute, doesn't the public get to
We did.
comment on the amendment?
He called for.
We called for it.
You did?
Yeah.
I was waiting here.
At
You
the very
blinked.
beginning.
So, that's no?
No.
Call the question.
Okay, the amendment on the table is to award $20,000 to Sitka Sound Science Center, $8,000 to Alpha, and $10,000 to ATA. Mr. Eisenbeis?
No.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
No.
Ms. Nelson?
No.
Mr. Knox?
No.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, the motion fails, so we're back to the main motion with those award amounts as $23,000 for Sitka Sound Science Center, $10,000 for Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association, and $5,000 to ATA.
Right. So I think we're ready to call for the vote. Yes, please, Steve.
Hold on. Go ahead, Steve.
While I don't like these amounts that we're giving this time, I would have liked to have seen the Assembly back up the legal fight a little bit more. As someone who has often been a stickler on policy and procedure, when it's pointed out to me what we were doing could be in violation of policy and procedure, I can't vote for it. So this isn't to say that ATA's fight is not important, nor do I believe that they should or are eligible for more money. But when we have an advertisement that says we will do it a certain way, I'm going to do it that way.
Noted. Okay, let's call for the vote then on this one.
Before we call for the vote, I'm going to be voting no on this because in the past, I've voted against utilizing these funds for lobbying and legal expenses by other groups because I personally don't believe that was the intent of how these funds would have been used when they were first passed by the voters. You know, if we could at some point further develop the definition of how these funds can be used, I think that would be helpful for this body and for applicants going into the future. I mean, in fiscal year 15, Chinook Futures looked for a substantial amount of the money to do some lobbying efforts, and we denied them for that. Lobbying and legal efforts kind of fall into this, for me, and sort of into the same pool. So for that reason, I'm going to be voting no. I would rather see for the, to follow the intent of the original vote by the voters, to see more of the funds go towards the actual enhancement, like a hatchery program, like the Sitka Sound Science Center offers. That being said, though, I do recognize that the legal efforts are important here. I'm happy to hear that the injunctions failed and that the fisheries will still be able to happen this summer. I'm hopeful that the prevailing side will be, fishermen and how things go forward, and not the environmental group that is presenting things the way they're presenting them, because it doesn't really sound like they have a lot to stand on at this point. But if we can find different funding streams, maybe something from visitor enhancement or something else that's not encumbered like this one should be, I think the city of Sitka should, back up the legal right too.
Noted. Lobbying is different than a lawsuit. Call the question. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think that we are within our rights according to the ordinance and the vote that was taken in 2006. I remember the intent, and I remember Erin, I can't remember her last name, the one that pushed this, and I remember discussions at the table for a few years after about, well, this doesn't fit, that doesn't fit. But per our advertisement in the paper, I think that we can do this legally and not be in violation of what the voters intended in 2006. At least when I voted yes, I had an idea as to what I thought it should be used for, and I think all three of these things fit. Thank you.
Of course we can. Yes, call for the question.
Okay, and just for the public, I'm going to read the awards. So the motion is to award $23,000 to the Sitka Sound Science Center, award $10,000 to Alpha, and award $5,000 to ATA. Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
No.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
And Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1 on item M.
Good.
Pax, I know we're close, but could we please take just a couple minutes?
All righty. Take a break.
Get the water gone.
I do.
I move to approve Resolution 2020-20. If we had pick 6 here, I'd play it. Authorizing a 50/50, matching grant application to the Office of Justice Program for a bulletproof vest partnership.
Second.
Comments from the public? Back to the assembly? Need a
Would
chief?
it be possible if
Yeah,
maybe
Chief Beatty.
Mr. Beatty had a word? Since it is 50, we've done this at the table before. Ballistic armor has a lifespan, whether it is ceramic or steel. And so this has come up to the assembly repeatedly, and this is just the time that we're at.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. As has been pointed out, ballistic armor does have a lifespan of 5 years. The materials degrade. The actual program is a federal grant program, which is a 50/50 match. And it's to encourage police departments and individuals to wear vests. It's been proven, well, basically, since they've been tracking law enforcement line of duty deaths, average about 85 per year. And with the use of vests, that numbers have gone down over the years as well. So a little known fact, and Lieutenant would never say this, but he's actually a benefactor of a vest. He's survived by the use of a vest. So they are an extremely useful tool for law enforcement. And of course, we can never tell what situations we're getting into or how badly they can get any given time. So we participate in this federal grant. It's a mandated use for departments who participate to have a policy for that, and that is our policy, that our officers wear vests.
Other questions to the chief? Okay, so other questions by the assembly? Call for the vote. Thank you, chief.
Okay, on the motion to approve Resolution 2020 on first and final reading, Mayor Paxton,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Dr. Ween,
Yes.
and Ms. Nelson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on item N.
Now at item O, may I have a motion, please?
I move to approve Resolution 2020-21, authorizing the municipal administrator to apply for and execute a grant with the Alaska Sustainable Salmon Fund for $125,000 to support the Peterson Storm Sewer Rehabilitation Project.
Second.
Comments from the public? Do you want Mr. Harmon to come up?
It would be nice to have at least a 60-second explanation about this grant and the benefits that it will have.
Good evening, Mayor and Assembly members. Michael Harmon, Public Works Director. This project is to replace a culvert under Peterson Street near the high school. In current environmental permitting arenas, we have to replace culverts like this to a fish passage capability, which makes a basic culvert maintenance project into, as you can see, a very expensive project, increasing the size of the culvert from a 5-foot diameter culvert to a 15-foot wide structure, essentially a culverted bridge. And, these changes are challenging for us. We don't have the funding mechanisms really set up to sustainably do this kind of maintenance. So we've been working for a long time on this project to just scrap together any type of grant funding we can find. Fish and Game, Fish and Wildlife, federal organizations have been trying to guide us in that. We've secured two other grants to date, and we're working on the third. And then this opportunity would be the biggest. You know, most of those have been pretty small pockets of money. The largest one, $140,000, and the pending one is $36,000 for a $1.2 million project. This one would be the biggest, hoping to get $125,000. So every dollar, of course, we can get in from that helps reduce the general fund commitment, which through budgets we have fully funded this project, but that money will just go back to the working capital as we succeed on these grants and can be used for anything else in future budgets. And so that's the real advantage to it. Yes, it's more maintenance and work in terms of administering grants, certainly, but I think we're compiling a nest egg between all of these that is worth that extra effort to reduce our budget at least a little bit.
I just want to thank you very much for the work on this, because that $125,000 will be significant if we should be successful, and it's appreciated. Thank you.
I have a quick question just about the project. Who owns the stream? Is it state or is it city or?
Well, ownership
of the land around it
varies. I mean, the road right away is ours. As you go up into it, depending on where you're at, it goes in different pockets. It goes on city land, for instance, around the Kim Sham area is a lot of it, and it goes through private easements, and it's a hodgepodge. The Corps of Engineers permitting, environmental permitting, you know, they really take control of all waters of the U.S. and creeks like this and have jurisdiction no matter what the land ownership is, and that really is what triggers a lot of this, that gets into the federal rules and their authority to have us do this, and opens the door for Fish and Game and others to get in there and comment on the process and make these requests.
I just wondered because I was taking a look at it today because of this and realized that the banks of that stream need some attention. And I didn't know who owns it. So anyway, that's fine. It's not relevant to this.
Other comments from the assembly?
So I actually had two questions for Michael. So this is just for that Peterson Creek or Peterson Street over, you know, the culvert there, right? This is
correct.
Actually any of the other culverts along. It's just that one.
That's correct. Yes, and Fish and Game has a goal to look at and improve every opportunity they're going to take as those culverts, whether it's under True Value all the way through to the laundromat, and that's been discussed. They'll be pushing for those to be fish passable when it comes time that they're going to need to be replaced. So those requirements will be hard on not just us, private ownership as well, to grapple with that. Right. But ultimately trying to rehab that stream.
I actually got the chance to talk to some of the surveyors and biologists that walked Peterson Creek at one point, and their comments about how badly undermined and corroded both the Peterson Street and the Wachusett Street culverts were. You know, they were really concerned about, you know, how long they'll last, their integrity. For Peterson Street, because it's a critical thoroughfare for us for evacuation routes, are there other pots of funding that we're pursuing as well?
Well, we're not seeing, we're not seeing it.
Security or others that have anything like that? I don't know.
We're just not seeing anything. You know, I mean, that would point to any and all efforts we put towards investing in lobbyists and grant writers and anybody to look for anything. I mean, we're maximizing what we have in resources to outline what all our project needs are and try and look for things. And the organizations, you know, here we have a permitting organization that's really trying to help us out as much as they can too, and we really appreciate that. They know this is not easy to try and upgrade the stream and get it more back to a natural state, and is expensive. So they've been very good to work with from that standpoint.
Other comments from the Assembly? Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve Resolution 2020-21 on first and final reading, Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on item O.
We know if this is your persons to be heard on any item on or off the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. I'm going to ask in advance for suspension of the rules. I think I'm going to go over 3 minutes, but I do have a frame of mind. I haven't figured out your agenda. I was going to try to be here at the first portion, figuring you were going to go through reports and everything like that, and I would have the opportunity to make it before persons to be heard, but I missed it. You can talk about the world situation, as we all know. I'm a 4x4 Tlingit, born and raised here in Sitka. I went to the demonstration that is emotionally on either side, more out of curiosity. I think that there were a lot of people that were in the same boat as I that may have been there out of curiosity. If you're going to demonstrate for a cause, action should be followed by that demonstration. This is Sitka, we're not Minneapolis. The following night, I went to a movie. I'm standing there. There was an individual in front of us that, pardon the term, not to be racist, but there's a white person standing in front of me. 2 others came afterwards. I was with a guest of mine. I got bumped, and they walked in front of me. First person purchased a ticket, said, "Well, I'll see you later," walked off. Then the next 2 that bumped me out of the way walked in front of me, bought their ticket, and went out. You know, and these were individuals that were demonstrating that we need to treat others respectfully. So if we're going to demonstrate, do the actions of your convictions. I think that I would like to ask the Assembly and the Administrator that you give your police department a strong endorsement. The actions that were brought up or keep bringing up our history, those individuals are no longer with your department. And the people that they involved are no longer with the department. I am by trade, as I've told you before, a nurse. The majority of my nursing career has been a night shift. I've had 2 CNAs working with me throughout the night, and there have been times I've had 6 certified nursing aides work with me during the course of the night. I've always said I do this confidently because regardless of whatever situation I get into, I have the confidence to be able to pick up 911 and have assistance come and help me out. There are individuals that I've had under my charge, clientele, that I've told them they are alive today not because of my nursing, but because of my nursing knowledge. I knew that I needed to pick up the phone and dial 911. So it's important that the people on the other end of 911 do their job confidently and not go into it being afraid. I would ask that not defund them, but maybe use some of that money that's supposed to hire first responders, give them a bonus for weathering the storm and sticking with their job during these difficult times. So on that note, thank you for the suspension of the rules, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, George. Good. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you, everybody, for the good work tonight.